The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall. I play Hera Syndulla on Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you always.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Welcome to the Secrets of Star Wars, where we discuss everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books, TV shows, and more, we're looking at the deeper themes and meanings and finding hope in the Star Wars universe. Today, we are talking about Skeleton Crew, Episode 6, Zero Friends Again. I'm your host, Robert King. Joining me today are John Koral and Thomas Salerno. Welcome, John.
Hello.
And it's good to see you, Thomas.
Hey, Robert, I see you did not try for the pirate narrator voice like Pat Mason did last week.
You know, I have tried some pirate voicing here and there, and I do not think I have a great pirate voice. So I'm gonna
What's your dread pirate, Robert? Like, how can you not have a good pirate voice?
Well, I don't want anyone to know that I don't have a good pirate voice, and that's why I leave no survivors.
Ah, I see. Very well, then.
Oh, man. Before we jump in to talk about Skeleton Crew, we do want to thank our patrons on Patreon. This episode, we'd especially like to thank Joshua G., Ruben B., Kevin H., Ryan N., and Stephanie G. Thank you so much. We couldn't make the Secrets of Star Wars without you, to say nothing of the many other shows here at StarQuest. And any of you listeners can join them at sqpn.com/give. All right, on to Skeleton Crew. It was quite an episode. We started, as we so often do in this show, exactly where we left off. Our heroes falling down this sort of chute from Tak Renad's treasure trove onto the snowy surface of Lanupa. And KB's Augs are starting to fail. This is bad. Far above them, Jod and SM-33 are getting captured by the pirates, who make a hasty retreat from some X-Wings. Still, the pirates get back to Brutus, Captain Brutus, who sentences Jod to death, but not before he can tempt the pirates to follow him to At-Aten for some shiny credits. Brutus agrees, but if there's no loot this time, it's outen of the airlock for Jod.
Good one.
Thank you. I worked all day on that one. Meanwhile, back on the planet, the kids see that the pirates left their ship, the Onyx Cinder, behind, whilst beating that hasty retreat. Fern wants to climb up and get it directly, but KB objects. So does Wim, who'd rather follow some trash crabs to see if they can lead them to local help. KB goes with Wim, Neil goes with Fern, but KB can't go very far. She just gets to the edge of a trash heap because those augments, they just keep going bad. They've been days without maintenance, and she is close to a total system shutdown. She tells Wim how to improvise a replacement fuse, which, you know, saves her life. And she also confesses that she hasn't been able to tell Fern because Fern's too impatient and won't listen when, you know, she thinks she can't do something. At the same time, Neil is telling Fern that he can't do something. He can't keep up climbing the city, and tells her, and Fern does listen. and connects a climbing rope and helps Neil, and they keep climbing. Unfortunately, everyone is too late. The Onyx Cinder is being hauled off as trash. Fern and Neil hop aboard just in time to follow it to the trash heap, where a giant trash crab is hunting down KB and Wim. They all barely escape in time to find their ship about to be devoured by an incinerator. With a bit of pluck and teamwork, they blow off the armored hull and emerge with a smaller, sleeker Onyx Cinder. And now, finally, they are really, truly, genuinely off to At-Aten. We think. So, there's a lot to talk about in this episode. Why don't we just start with KB? I mean, on an earlier podcast, I think we said that each kid was likely to get sort of a spotlight episode, and I think this is really KB's episode in a lot of ways. And yeah, so what do you think about KB in this episode, her augments, her arc, how things are going with her? John, why don't we start with you?
Well, I like KB in this episode a lot because you got to see a more human side, I guess, of her versus the, I guess the cyborg or whatever you call the augments and stuff. But I like that part of her, but I also like the way they've been developing the children, and especially her in this one, with the way, she has had these fears and these anxieties about, I can't talk to Fern because if I do that, then, she'll be, like you said, she was not patient and she won't, listen, and I'll lose her as a friend and then I'll be without a friend, which is the name of this episode. Mm-hmm. And then it was neat to see that because, how many kids deal with these fears about, well, if I speak up, or even adults, if I speak up on this topic, will I cause problems with my friends on social media or whatever it might be? And it's like, it's a simple thing, and they did a really good job of showing that side of her. And then you also saw the good side of Wim, and he's like, who cares? You can be my friend and Neil's, and then it's something that she never thought of, I think, that is what made that really kind of neat with it's just the whole, but it was neat to see the side of her where, we've seen her as really efficient and almost machine-like precision and all that kind of stuff with things she's done with shooting guns and things and memorizing stuff and carrying information. And now it was neat to see more of the girl that KB is as well.
Yeah, especially like at the end when she's, they say, can you start up the ship? And she says, I think so. I think it's something like this. And just absolutely expertly, she's pushing all the buttons and flipping the switches. She knows exactly what she's doing. Mm-hmm. And you realize, she doesn't think of that when she thinks of what she's able to do. She thinks of what she's not able to do. She can't keep up with Fern. She can't, do the physically daring or go into dangerous environments. She's the corrosion to her augments and that'll, she's got limitations, but she doesn't want to say, no, I can't do that. She's afraid of what Fern will. Yeah. She's afraid that Fern will reject her because she's not able to do the same things that Fern does. Mm. But she doesn't think about what she can do that Fern can't do.
Right. And I think, too, with Fern, or it sounds like, too, KB could probably do a lot of the things that Fern used to be able, or that does, until she had her accident and then had to have these augmentations and stuff. So at some point, so that's where, and that was another interesting part too, where they're mentioning, well, she doesn't live in reality. And
I loved that line.
And I liked it when Wim's like, yeah, of course not. Well, what do you mean? Or whatever.
Yes.
Because Wim's the one always imagining some, as Yoda would say, never his mind on where he was,
Yeah.
I was very glad that this episode put a spotlight on KB because up to this point, I had found her kind of the least interesting of the kids. And so I'm glad that this episode really humanized her. And I was very surprised the route they went of showing the disability side of her augments, and there's we know a lot of kids will be watching this, and there's something important I think that's being said here about ableism, and in the fact where I thought it was interesting where she says, well, Fern just treats me like I'm just like her and can do everything she does. And Wim's like, well, isn't that great? And she's like, no, because I can't do everything she does. She's not basically he's like, Fern is not recognizing that KB has a disability and maybe cannot do all of those things. But at the same time, we see that KB having these physical limitations doesn't hold her back as a person.
Yes. Yes.
So she's not letting the disability keep her down in any way. But she does have limitations, and she, like everyone does, and she acknowledges those limitations. She just wish that her friend Fern would acknowledge them, but as we've mentioned, she was too afraid to broach the subject. I just thought it was really interesting and just surprising and edifying that this show would go in this direction. And I think in that way it respects its child audience enough to speak about these topics.
Yeah, and it even seemed to me that she had a little shame about her inabilities. She just, she felt like Fern was not pretending like her limitations weren't there. But she was kind of pushing herself as far as she possibly could go, as well. And she didn't want to make a big deal, and she was kind of reluctant to talk even to Wim about it. And I thought this was a moment of growth for her, I think, where she realized that, that shame is misplaced. The shame that even I feel about it. Is misplaced, and it's just a part of reality. I have these augments. They require maintenance. We need to pay attention to this. Right.
It's just like anyone who has any kind of medical condition that needs to be checked after, or requires supervision in some way. That. I just felt it was so interesting. It's very relatable to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's no shame in having that kind of, in being that way. Yeah. And so I think that it's a good message, not just for the child audience, but for everybody, it doesn't do it in any kind of it's part of the story and it's part of the characters. It's not like we're going to teach you a moral now, kids. It's not, knowing is half the battle like G.I. Joe. It's it's very much integrated into the story and the characters so that you're invested in it and absorbed by what's happening instead of I didn't find myself thinking, oh, here's the moral. I was just rather impressed with the growth of all the characters.
Yeah. And I thought
go ahead,
I was just going to say the second time watching it is when I caught a lot more of that. The first time it was, paying more attention to the adventure, the action side and things. And there was the second time when it was like, oh, wow, that is pretty neat how they tackle this topic. And, and then how they bounce it back and forth between Wim and KB as well as Neil and then Fern too. and how they're dealing with those issues. You know, his physical limitations against her long spider legs.
Yeah, that was great. I don't have long spider legs like you do.
So,
but yeah, Neil sort of provides the counterpoint to KB in that sense. It's like, oh, when you do speak up, when you do say this is the reality, then other people, and in this case even Fern, is able to hear that and respond to it, and Fern responded in a pretty appropriate manner, I thought. Like it's like, oh, this is a problem. Let's focus on the problem and see how we can, you know, pursue our goal.
And I also liked that they flipped the usual character dynamics here, because, you know, the two friend pairs were always Wim and Neil, and then Fern and KB. And here they swapped everybody out. So now you have all these new dynamics with Wim and KV and Fern and Neil, which were very interesting,
right?
Because it's flipped from what we usually see.
Yeah. And you see everybody's sort of learning curve really escalating in this episode, I think. Like Wim, who desperately wants to be the leader, is learning how to follow. And Fern is learning how to listen.
Right.
And I thought it was, this is maybe jumping a little bit ahead, but you see Fern listening to the critique that she doesn't listen. And really taking that in and applying it when she listens to Neil. And then kind of even applying it in a different way at the very end of the episode when she doesn't listen to everyone who's saying, you know, don't touch the whole demolition switch. You know, SM33 said never ever touch it. Don't touch it. And she listens and takes it in and then makes her decision. And before, I get a sense that she wouldn't have listened to their warnings. But I got the feeling that she listened to the warnings at the end, like evaluated the situation and said, no, I hear where you're coming from, but this has to happen. This is the only way out. And hit the switch, and then we got our you know, I don't know.
Well,
Silver Dagger version of the Onyx Cinder.
Yeah. Well, the thing too is, in the prior, I don't know if it was the episode before that, 4 or 5, I can't remember, but you know, she was stressing out because she's like, why do I have to make all these decisions? I don't know what I'm doing either, and all this stuff. And when they're on the ship at the end, it's like KB's like, here, I'm going to do this. Okay, I can't do this. I got to jumpstart it. Neil, you're going to be the one controlling it. And then you know, when things aren't working out, Wim's like, here, I'll go try to shoot him, you know, and stuff. And they're making decisions, so she's not the only one that has to, you know, she's contributing when she says, look, I'll do the steering, you do the throttle, but she's not there just saying, okay, now what do I tell everybody to do? They're all taking steps forward for themselves, that responsibility, and like, okay, we're going to do this to help you out. So when she gets to that point, she's not super overwhelmed because she's already had all those other decisions to make. They've helped her along as well, as, you know, as being like more of a team. And then she got to make the final decision on the whole thing. But I thought that was good too, because in the past it was like, what are we going to do, Fern? What do we do? You know, the whole time. And it's like, well, you're the captain. Tell us what we're doing, you know. And now she can still make those decisions as captain, but she has a crew that knows their rules as well and can contribute more to alleviate some of that stress and pressure.
Yeah. I mean, no surprise for a show that is explicitly a coming of age story. But but we're seeing a lot of growth into maturity in all of these characters, and I'm just loving the progress that we're seeing. And yeah, I mean, like the idea of growing from childhood into adulthood, it's been explicit in almost every episode, and I love the line, for instance, "I'm not having this baby fight with you." It's like, we're not here to act like children. But they really do start acting, I don't know if I'd say like adults or grown-ups, but acting with wisdom and maturity and like what we would call virtuous people. As we're recording this is the Feast of the Epiphany right now, and we remember all of these times in not just the coming of the kings, but also the baptism of our Lord and his baptism in the Jordan, and in between that time when he was between when he was found in the temple and his baptism in the Jordan, when he grew in strength and wisdom and knowledge, and seeing these kids growing in wisdom and strength and knowledge it's a really satisfying thing to watch dramatically. I enjoy it a lot. One of the things that really caught my attention was when Wim and KB were at the junk heap, and Wim saw a droid, or parts of a droid in the junk heap, and thought beyond himself and thought, oh, I wonder if SM-33 is okay. And I think that's one of the real markers of growth and maturity, is starting to think beyond himself, beyond, because Wim has always been, it's like, oh, I'm having fun. I'm on an adventure. Let's do what I want to do. And he's beginning to think about other people now, which is really cool. Were there moments that like jumped out at you of oh yeah, this is a real step in growth in virtue or growth in maturity?
Well, when you were talking earlier too, I mean, I guess about Fern and how she was impatient and stuff, but then dealing with Neil when and how she grew with that experience when she came back. I mean, I guess I was going to say before that all happened, you could see how difficult it would be to talk to Fern about what you would think is a personal issue, because she's like, come on, just say it, mm-hmm. And it's like, you need to be patient. You need to be calm and, and stuff. And now she was, comes back more humble, like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, and they're all apologizing. The only one who really didn't have to apologize was Neil, because he was the guy that was just, and what I like about Neil, I think, is you can tell he's, and I think somebody's mentioned in the prior episode, he's the only one that has this real, like, family, traditional family with siblings and everything like that, whereas the other ones, have like a single mom or a single dad, and they're on their own a lot. And you can tell he's had to deal with family dynamics more. So when he's like, here, let's stop arguing. We can't argue. It's like, I can see it like Big Brother coming in with two little siblings, or something. And he sees the problem with that. And so, I mean, he's got that level of maturity, which is neat already to at least on some of that dynamic. But as nervous as he gets, he is starting to speak up more and not just follow the crowd, I guess, too. I think when he was telling, like you were mentioning earlier, when he mentioned speaking up to Fern about his issues, and whereas KB was afraid to, when he's following her. So I don't know. I'm just kind of bouncing around a lot there, but I like seeing Neo be a little more confident with the way he's doing things, but he's always been kind of the guy that kind of understood more about teamwork, I guess. Whereas Wim and Fern, I think, are coming to that point of the more and more they do it, they're seeing it's not a tug, they're not. In the past, it was my way or the highway kind of thing, and now they're seeing it more as, especially Wim. Okay, she's like saying something. Well, I shouldn't have done this. She's like, no, you were awesome. He didn't like. And he's actually complimenting her on the things that she's doing and stuff too. And I think that's a step forward as well. It's not just, he's not jealous of it. He's just excited. Hey, look at what we did. And
I also saw a little bit of growth of kind of self-awareness or self-knowledge in Wim, where he's like, why do I have this problem of telling the good guys from the bad guys? Why does this always happen to me?
That was a great line.
Yes, yeah. But it shows that he's acknowledging that he doesn't have the best track record of judging people's character. So, I mean, like they say that, self-knowledge is one of the first steps towards improvement. So got to recognize that there's an issue before you can do anything about it. So,
and Wim is absolutely learning. Yeah. I have a thought about that, but I just want to make sure, Thomas, that was there anything else that you wanted to say about like the kids' growth in virtue or maturity?
Stop me if we've already mentioned this, but just I really liked the teamwork together in the ship, where they're bouncing off one another, not bickering, barking orders at one another. It's just like they all know what they're good at, and they're and they know what each other is good at, and they have the confidence in one another to let that person step into that role without trying to micromanage them or just like, no, let me do it. It's like none of that sort of childish bickering. And, they're more like a team now, and they trust one another. There's been this growth in trust over the course of the show. Whereas whereas before they were just bickering and didn't really know what to make of one another or to trust one another. And so I don't know if it's now because they have a common enemy in Silvo, but they're being forced by circumstances, well, like in this whole episode, if they don't trust one another and work together, they're not going to survive. They're going to die of exposure on that planet or get crushed by a trash compactor or be eaten by a giant, monstrosity. So, it's put our differences aside and come on, let's just work together and get this done. So I appreciated all that.
Yeah, they really have come together as an ensemble, as a family, as a team. It's terrific.
Yeah, it's like the kind of things that I like about something like the team in Star Wars Rebels. Where it's like all of these variously different characters with different strengths, different foibles, different personalities that can often grate on one another. But in the end, they're family and they come together and, and nothing can stop them because they're a family and they trust one another.
Yeah. Yeah. So jumping back to the, why am I always wrong about who's the good guy?
Right.
The first person that Wim picked out as the good guy in the show was, of course, Jod. And in the last episode, we had Jod's big betrayal. But I've kind of been getting Scoundrel with a Heart of Gold from him for most of this series. I get a very much a sort of Han Solo type vibe from him. But I'm not sure where he's going now. Do you think
Jod manipulates people in a way that Han Solo never did?
That is absolutely fair, yeah.
He manipulates the kids. He manipulates the other pirates. He's very much he can bend people. With his sheer charisma when he wants to.
Do you think he's more like a Lando Calrissian? Like
a dark Lando Calrissian.
Yeah,
maybe.
But I mean, because making deals and trying to, get other people on board with what he really wants. But then, I don't know. Yeah, I was just thinking about that though, because especially when Lando had to work with the Emperor or the Empire, Darth Vader and stuff, and Empire Strikes Back and stuff, but. Mm-hmm. And then he was complaining, this deal keeps getting worse all the time. And that's what and then I kind of, for whatever reason, that made me think of Wim a little bit. Why do I always think of think the wrong guys are the, good guys kind of thing. But
I think the difference is that in that Lando was almost put in an impossible situation because as he mentions to Han, what does he say? I'm responsible. It's the price you pay for being successful. Because Lando doesn't just have to worry about himself, but all the people who work for him and live in Cloud City. And when the Empire comes calling, he's like, well, to save all these people, I'm going to have to betray my friend. And whereas I feel like Jod is more, he is in it for the credits. And that's the only thing, seemingly. So you think there's no redemption arc for Jod? Oh no, I didn't say that. I'm just saying that he is a darker character than Han Solo or Lando Calrissian. I think he is there's more grit and more of an edge to him. If he's gonna have a redemption arc, I think they're really gonna have to earn it. But I think it's possible. I just think he's not. Maybe he has a heart of bronze and not a heart of gold.
Heart of bronze. Nice.
He's not. Yeah, it's like I can. And he's had those moments with the kids, like when he's talking to Wim about that whole bit about attachments and stuff. And I could see on the one hand you're being manipulative, but on the other hand, you seem like you genuinely understand what Wim's going through and want to offer some sage advice. So there's definitely layers and wrinkles to his character, but I think first and foremost, he's a pirate who wants credits.
So you think he's more of a Long John Silver type?
Oh yes, and
he'll mentor you, and he'll fill you. He'll give you sage advice that's really the best advice he can give. But in the end, he'll also toss you aside and even kill you if you stand between him and his gold.
I mean, yeah, I think they've been broadcasting that from the very beginning, that his name is Silvo. And I'm like, yeah, he's Long John Silver. So, and Long John Silver does not have a redemption arc, at least in the original book, from what I remember. So,
I think it was just they were dropping enough hints that there was some real humanity to him that.
Oh yeah.
That I wanted to think he will, and now I'm afraid he won't, and I'm having feelings about that, and I'm not sure I like them.
I am just interested to learn more about his backstory, which supposedly we will get before the series is done, because I really want to see what's brought him to this point. Who was he? What's his deal? How much, if any, Jedi training did he have? He can parrot their aphorisms very well, but it's like, you know, but
and he
I
doesn't seem to need much effort to do like the basic telekinetic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like he knows the basics, and he knows the fundamentals of moving stuff with his mind, and he knows, you know, their basic philosophy. So I'm like, I'm just interested to know more about. He's a very compelling character. I'll agree with that, and I want to learn more about him. So, you know, and how he's gotten to this place. And for me, one of the highlights of this episode was his trial scene and his speech, his "I'm hungry" speech.
Oh, let's talk about that. That is such a great speech. Go ahead.
No, it's just brilliant. I'm like, and I like the setup where, again, like he can see that somebody in the crowd is not comfortable with the way the proceedings is going. And someone says, you know, like, hey, shouldn't he have the right to speak in his own defense? That's the code. And so Brutus is like, okay, you know, because they seem to be very like superstitious about breaking the pirate code. Like they won't do it. So he has this very impractical plasma hourglass.
Yes.
I'm like, wait. I'm like, plasma is the fourth state of matter and is very, very, very hot. I don't know how it doesn't melt through the hourglass, but I'm like, whatever. Don't think about it. But anyway, like he gives Jod time to speak, and Jod just plays those pirates like a fiddle. It was great to watch.
Yeah. Brutus is a very competent first mate.
Yes, yeah.
He'll give you a steady stream of scraps. I will promise you the universe. Just, yeah. The rhetoric of it is amazing.
And how he like goes up to people, he knows people's individual stories. He's being very manipulative. Mm-hmm. You know, he's like, I know that farm you're saving up for, you know, and you could be your own captain, command a whole fleet. And he's like promising them like their greatest dreams. And it was, you can see why he had captained this crew for so long in the first place. Because Brutus is literally using brute force to hold all these people together. Whereas Jod has the charisma and the promise of treasure. And I think I believe it was on our Discord, Dom Benelli was mentioning how like the Republic credits basically fill the story. They're the MacGuffin that like doubloons would be in a pirate's story.
Yeah.
And he's basically telling them there's a whole island full of Spanish doubloons out there. You know, you could be independently wealthy for the rest of your life. And yeah, it's just, and I loved the pirate shanty that he brings in at the end. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For at Aten he did plunder.
Yeah, and although one thing that that was distracting to me, and only I would get distracted at something like that, is that there was a guy in the background literally wearing a tri-corner pirate hat. Yes. And I'm like, oh, come on, that's so lazy.
I noticed that too, and I was thinking, and I thought of this about the hourglass as well, because it's like, come on, a plasma hourglass, it just makes no sense. Yeah. But I mean, this whole show is full of just genre references, you know, and it's, I don't know if I would call it quite breaking the fourth wall, but it is definitely letting you, the audience member, know that it knows what it's drawing on, and you know, it's I was telling you before the show, I said, you know, this is a show that wears its influences like the badges on a Weeblos on a Cub Scout sleeve. You know, it's just like proud of those influences on its sleeve, and And so I took the tricorn hat in that vein, and I took the hourglass in that vein. It's like, this is not, it's plasma, sure. But it's what it is it's sci-fi sand,
Yes, yeah.
It's something that looks cool. It's sand, but cooler. Yeah. I mean, I guess this is just me always taking Star Wars not really as science fiction, but as space fantasy. This is
it's a fairy tale in space.
It's a fairy tale in space. Yeah. Yeah. So, the physics don't make sense. The economics don't make sense. Who cares? It's a fairy tale. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was surprised at first that Brutus goes for it. But then I'm like, he needs to keep this crew in line. And they've all been whipped up into this frenzy of, the treasure planet is real and all that stuff. So, but I like the ultimatum he basically gives. He's like, okay, we'll follow up on this. But if there's nothing at the end of this, I am shoving you out the airlock before you can say at. It's like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's just even the camera work on it of shoving his cheek against the yellowing glass of it and then reversing the shot to see all the trash just sort of flying out into the maybe not vacuum of space, because Star Wars physics. But
yeah, it's like I don't like. I've seen other sci-fi where it's like, a convenient way to execute somebody is by spacing them. And we haven't really seen that in Star Wars much. So, it's like, and they acknowledged this earlier in this show. So I'm like, I'm glad they're finally like showing that this is a possibility in universe that, we're in space. If you want to get rid of somebody, you shove them out an airlock, right? It's like, yeah.
It's hard to have them walk a plank. So.
Exactly, yeah. How would you throw somebody to the barnacles though? I don't know how that would work in Star Wars.
Keel haul them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. It depends on how. They could get really gory if they threw someone out and let them flop through the thruster backwash or something.
Yeah.
That might be a little above the PG-13 rating that they normally aim for.
Unless they played it for laughs, like Muppet Treasure Island. One of my favorite lines in that is where Gonzo says, "Hey, later on, one of the pirates said he'd throw a line out the back and let me drag along the bottom." Because of course Gonzo would think that's fun, but I digress.
Oh, that is fantastic.
I just thought it was interesting too in that whole scene though is when Brutus gives the verdict, he refers to him as Mad Captain Silvo, and I don't know if I've heard him as Mad before. I've heard it's like Crimson Jack and Captain Silvo and stuff, but I don't know if I've heard of. I couldn't remember if they've said Mad before, but that was interesting to talking about backstory. It's like I'd like to know where all these names came from and what attributes to him.
He definitely has this reputation for as not just being charismatic, but for having a larger than life legendary kind of persona about him. And there's a little bit of the Captain Jack Sparrow in this as well,
Mm-hmm.
He's a teller of tall tales and of getting people to believe in those tall tales. Right. And At-Atin is maybe just the latest of many a tall tale.
Right. Yeah, is he mad as an angry or mad because he's crazy because he gets into these tall tales and he's ready to go go check out the next tall tale and try to find his treasure. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I definitely took it as the latter. Yeah.
The crazy.
Speaking of people who are not quite in touch with reality. Yeah. And you get this right from the very beginning of episode 1, where he comes on, he marches onto the ship. I know we've been through some hard times, lads, but here are some cold hard credits. And whatever info he had got was just completely wrong, and
all right.
Yeah.
Well, and then Kim, in that one episode too, she mentioned something to the kids or something, or maybe she was talking to him about another wild adventure or something along those lines. Where, what are you doing now, kind of thing. So yeah, that was. But that was just another little.
Like he says, he always trusts his gut.
Yeah. Yeah.
He just goes with, this feels right, I'm doing it. Like, he hasn't stopped to think, it's like, okay, is this comparatively small group of pirates going to take over an entire planet to have access to all those credits? And then what would you do with them? And, how would you spend them anywhere? And wouldn't that get back to you somehow? Like, what?
Yeah, we'll burn that bridge when we come to it.
Right. Yeah. It's like they're not thinking that far ahead. I mean, they're pirates, I guess. They're just
I love the way it absolutely holds up to this pirate movie tradition of making the pirates really sympathetic and like you kind of fall in love with the pirates, and they're charismatic and they're delightful and they're funny and they're fun, and you kind of want to be one. And at the same time, they are just unarguably the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's I don't know.
They're like, in a very similar vein, the outlaws in a cowboy movie. Be the same way, where it's like, they're charismatic and funny and you kind of want to be one, but they're also definitely the bad guys because they go around robbing banks and shooting people. So it's like, I feel like we have this tradition in film, but in literature too, of of romanticizing a little bit, because like in more realistic fiction, they would just show the unvarnished evil of these people, and then you wouldn't have any sympathy for them. But I feel like in a lot of our storytelling, we want to make the villains a little bit sympathetic, so it's like, and especially with pirates and Old West outlaws, they've become these kind of Robin Hood figures, when the real, like, from what I understand, the real reality of, say, Caribbean pirates was quite literally cutthroat and brutal and just a lot of cold-blooded murder. So it's like, nothing really admirable about them. But, that's not conducive to a swashbuckling adventure story of this variety, I guess.
I guess, yeah, I half expected this to turn into a bit of a Robin Hood situation because, well, I mean, the original Star Wars, the rebels were, outlaws who were, they were guerrilla, an underground guerrilla resistance. And they were fighting, guerrilla warfare, and they did it by breaking a lot of laws. But yeah, they were very much the Robin Hood that, it was for a higher good, the higher good we keep coming back to for these pirates is the credits. And it's like, okay, there is no truly higher good that they're serving. They only, they're like Han Solo at the beginning, it's like, I look out for one person, and that's me. Which I think is, it's coming back to like that weird desire I have for a redemption arc for Jod, that for Silvo, for Crimson Jack, for whatever he's called. Because I on the one hand, I really want him to become a more heroic character. And on the other hand, it's kind of refreshing that it seems like maybe he's not. That it's like, oh yeah, it really is possible to give in to your baser desires, and this is what happens when you do it. This is what happens when you follow a path of selfishness, and it's not your Darth Vader version of falling to the dark side. It's just a very different way of falling to the dark side, I guess.
Silvo just wants those 4 kind of traditional lesser goods that we talk about in our kind of Catholic tradition, right? Of wealth, power, pleasure, and honor, that are goods that are less than God, but that we sometimes make idols out of. And I feel like Silvo, in his own way, is enslaved by all 4 of those things, or a lust for all 4 of those things. Because with wealth brings power, and the ability to get whatever pleasure you want, and the honor of being the person who found Atten and claimed the treasure and is this big pirate king and all that. So he wants all that, but I feel like it would be very interesting if his arc was he gets all of that and he's still hungry, as he says. He's still empty. Yeah. If he could get the world, so to speak, and still be empty, right? For what does it profit a man if he gains the entire world and loses his soul? That would be a very interesting arc. Maybe a little bit depressing one, but I think interesting for a man like Silvo.
Well, and you very much see his like mirror image in Wim, who And I don't know, I hadn't thought of this. I'd have to give it some thought, but if you look at those 4 great temptations, each of the kids kind of has some aspect of that temptation, but Wim absolutely kind of is the one who most wants to be like Jod, and yet more and more is discovering a path to humility and a path to virtue and a path to service. He's not chasing after adventure anymore. He wants to help his friends get home. He wants to get home himself.
Right. He's Jim Hawkins. Who goes on a very similar sort of arc. It becomes less about this quest for the treasure than I got to help my friends get home. Like we've got to get out of this.
Yeah.
Well, you were talking earlier about the growth of the children. The other one too was when he listened to what KB was telling him how to fix the what do you call that thing? Her fuse or yeah. And and then at the end of it, he's doing all this stuff, and she's not saying, you got to get this done or I'm going to shut down completely or whatever. But then when she says to him, probably you thought it would be more exciting to save somebody's life.
That was a great line. I love that.
But that's the thing is, just even a couple episodes ago, Wim's like getting depressed because he's like, hey, this isn't what I thought the adventure would be like. Come on, this isn't, we're going to go home already. And this isn't, and now he saved somebody's life, and he actually, it wasn't the grandiose way he thought maybe he would save somebody's life. but I think you could tell with his smile afterwards, and then when she calls him a Jedi, too, which was a neat little touch. You could tell their friendship was stronger, but then also that, it was sinking in that, yeah, he did save somebody's life, and, it is probably, it's not the adventure he maybe dreams about, but it is, and now it's becoming more reality to him that this is a true adventure he's on, and I think he's appreciating it more, that what they're accomplishing and stuff too. And I think that's some growth in him too, where he doesn't, it doesn't have to be this incredibly wild thing that like Jod's looking at, all the time. He's like, he's appreciating the smaller things, even though they were big things as well, but just not in the swashbuckling, exciting, grandiose thing that you think it would be like, so.
Yeah. Again, KB kind of steals the show, and she's the heart of this episode, and I keep coming back to her, and that insight, and being a Jedi is not about the Force powers. It's not about the wise aphorisms. It's about being there to save someone's life when they need it. It's about being present for another. And, that's, that's fantastic.
I was kind of wondering when they blow the hull off the ship, and how incredible that ship looks without that hull. What is the purpose of the hull? Is it like more armor or something? Or because it's like, I'm wondering if we're going to see like down the line something about that, because it's like, never touch that button. But I'm like, why not? You went from this seemingly unimpressive ship to this incredible looking, shiny gleaming ship and stuff. So I was kind of wondering though, why they didn't want the hull blown off in what that hull provided that,
camouflage maybe. Like he has this very impressive ship, but he doesn't want it to stick out like its original owner, so he's like, I can make it seem like, a beat up old freighter, so it doesn't draw the attention of the authorities or my potential victims.
Okay.
Maybe that's what I was thinking.
Kind of like putting up a country's flag instead of the Jolly Rogers or whatever.
Right.
Flag,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, that's just some, some kind of freighter or something out there, and not some. Okay, maybe that's the.
Maybe. What he did. Somebody talked about it being armored, having armored the ship. And so I thought that would be part of it. But. I mean, I wouldn't put it above them just making it a set piece, because it really was cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing we've been talking about, the deeper themes and meanings in this episode. But there was some great action in it too, and some great special effects, and John, was it you said you'd noticed a particular stop motion?
Oh,
that was Thomas.
Yeah.
So I would be remiss if, as a fan of old stop motion movies and of Ray Harryhausen, the master of stop motion from the last century, I would be remiss if I did not mention that I saw a very interesting behind the scenes YouTube video that the giant mother hermit crab that is going to devour the kids at one point was a stop motion creature animated by the current living master of the art, Phil Tippett, who worked on the original Star Wars trilogy, doing the stop motion for the AT-ATs and for the Tauntauns and many of the other like little stop motion effects that are scattered throughout the original Star Wars trilogy. So to see Phil Tippett back on Star Wars was really great, and also to see that they decided to actually do a complex stop motion creature like this was really edifying. As someone who likes stop motion and practical special effects like that, I just thought that was great. I would never have guessed that creature was stop motion, but it makes sense that they would pick such a complex monster, given that Ray Harryhausen did the 9-headed Hydra and Jason and the Argonauts and all that, all that great stuff. So yeah, I was very, very pleased with that. And there was a funny bit when they were talking to the special effects people, how he said I pitched it to the team to do it stop motion. And I thought everyone would say I was crazy. No, you can't do that. But they just leapt right into it as a challenge. Yeah, let's do it. And yeah, I'm so glad that stop motion as an art is not dead. It has not been completely replaced by CGI.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Oh, that's now I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch it with that in mind and appreciate it.
And that crab has pretty good aim too.
I also thought it was interesting how they played on our expectations. So we have been sort of brainwashed by Star Wars into thinking immediately trust the cute little native alien. Not only with, of course, the Ewoks, but the cute little turtle hermit crab creatures from Ahsoka. So and so when Wim's instinct is to trust the cute little hermit crabs that go, follow, help, yes, help,
friendly,
follow,
friendly.
Of course you believe them. And you believe Wim, you're like, yeah, those will probably be helpful. And then they completely subvert our Star Wars expectations by having them just bring you to the giant, Shelob Cthulhu crab monster who's going to devour all. So I just thought that was very clever way to sort of hook us into that. Because I was like, oh, of course these things are going to find a way to help. And it's like, nope.
Yeah.
They're just the Pied Piper.
Yeah. I don't know. I loved the hijacking the trash hauler drones and just how no ship in this series seems to be able to fly without crashing on takeoff or landing, just scraping across the ground or scraping across the other buildings or ships or something. And I think that's fantastic. And these kids would absolutely be dead. They would have fallen and broken all their bones, as Wim had predicted, if Star Wars physics were anything like our physics. Right. But it made for just fun roller coaster action sequences, and I loved it.
What did Neil say? We're getting better at falling.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's make this the last time, though.
I can almost hear Obi-Wan in the background. Another happy landing.
Yeah. Well, with that, I suppose we should take a little happy landing here and ask you listeners, what do you think about this antepenultimate episode of Skeleton Crew? Did you enjoy the adventure? Did you get wrapped up in the drama of the kids' character interactions? Do they reflect your experience of life, of difficult relationships, of dealing with abilities or disabilities in your life? What do you think is going on with Jod? I don't know. Do you want him to have a redemption arc? I still do. I think I still do. Anyway, you can let us know. Drop us an email at starwars@sqpn.com. You can join us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Or as you heard us talk about, there's always conversation going on the Discord server. Go to our website, sqpn.com/discord to get an invitation to that server. If you would like a bit of Tack Renaud's legendary plunder, you can go to our store, sqpn.com/merch, and get some official Secrets of Star Wars gear, featuring our slogan, Finding Hope in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. Be sure to follow our podcast, Secrets of Star Wars, and any SQPN on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever platform you're using. You can also find us on the StarQuest YouTube channel. And once again, if you'd like to support our work, and this podcast in particular, please head over to sqpn.com/give. So, until next time, Thomas, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Robert.
And John, it is always great to talk with you.
Hey, it's great talking with you too, Robert. Had a great time.
Once again, I've been Robert King. Thank you all for sharing the secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy. Vatican II in a Year. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Vatican.